Nobody cares about the Big 12 though, because the Big 12 sucks, and like that's why people vouching for y'all. Like y'all about to start getting Notre Dame treatment. People about to stop vouching for y'all to go to the playoffs because y'all do the same thing every time y'all get in. I mean, I know OU sucks, but don't get mad about it. Now, don't throw picks because OU sucks now.
No, you can keep doing it.
You're saying the Big 12 is not good because you're an SEC fan.
No, I'm saying the Big 12 is not good because everybody knows the Big 12 sucks. The Big 12 plays no defense.
So you're saying five teams that are worth mentioning in the SEC are better than the Big 12.
You ready?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. What up? It's your boy Amari, and I'm here with my co-host Christian Phillips, and you're tuned in to Talkin Oklahoma football. Today we just want to get into the depth of Oklahoma's football this year and the struggles and the bright spots of OU in that tradition they have down in Norman, man. How you doing today, Christian?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm all right, man. I can't complain. It's a beautiful Friday. Had a good workout this morning. Got some homework done before I got here, so I'm thriving, kind of, I guess you can say.
Well, all right, man. So the topic of discussion is the sky falling in Norman, Oklahoma. Obviously, the Oklahoma Sooners got off to a pretty strong start to their season with a 48-0 win over Missouri State. Spencer Rattler had a 14-17 outing with 290 yards and 4 touchdown passes. It kind of seemed like their offensive production was at par with previous seasons under Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, and Baker Mayfield. And you also have to take into consideration the level of competition. Obviously, somebody's going to put in.
Missouri State is.
Yeah.
They should have put up 80 on Missouri State, honestly. If they wanted to prepare themselves for the season, they should have scored as many points as they could.
And that's what was alarming. They had the backup quarterback, Mordecai, in, and he was only able to produce a little bit for the Oklahoma offense, but still it's Missouri State. They should have been able to score at least 21 more points during that second half. So after that first game, they had a bye week that separated their Big 12 opener against K-State, who had upset Oklahoma last season 48-41 in Manhattan, Kansas. This year, Oklahoma obviously got off to a pretty strong start. They were leading 21-7 at half. Rattler had 2 INTs. One came off of a tipped pass, and then one came off of a long pass to Marvin Mims. And one thing to note, that Oklahoma was outscored 31-14 in the second half against K-State. And K-State had over 400 yards, and 90% of that came within the third and fourth quarter. So what is your takeaway from that?
Well, remember before that game, like we were on Talking Nonsense, our podcast, and I literally told you, I said, I don't know how to feel about this. They had a young quarterback in Oklahoma, and K-State always finds a way to play OU hard. Like, I was kind of scared that my take would be like way off because, like you said, K-State lost to Arkansas State in week 1, but K-State came out and they showed us what they do well. They play the Sooners well. And you said y'all went up 21-7 with a freshman quarterback going up 21-7, first game of conference play, first start in the conference. His head was kind of big, you know it. And he has a big head naturally, so you give him a 21-7 lead at half, first conference game of the year, first conference game of his career. You know he was in the locker room feeling real comfortable. And they came out the second half, and K-State's defense put it on them.
So one thing I'd like to talk about is Oklahoma's historically bad defense. Obviously, in previous seasons, I would say except for 2015 when Oklahoma made the playoffs with Baker Mayfield's first year in 2015, their defense was somewhat good, but in 2017, 18, and 19, their defense has been porous. but they've had an offense that was able to dig them out of holes, score a lot of points, and that's why they won. So how much blame is actually put on the offense without having to produce and to kind of uplift that defense?
Man, I don't like. Don't get me wrong. The blame goes on the offense only because like they've spoiled the defense for so long, being so good that the defense hasn't had to push themselves. So I feel like that's where like the offense can take that blame. Like they haven't had to stop people they haven't had to stop people consistently for so long because your offense has always scored points that when your offense can't score, the defense is just like, what y'all doing? Y'all need to tighten up instead of saying like, we need to go get a stop. So I feel like the defense is like they haven't learned to take that accountability that the game is on them yet. They still think the game is on the offense because y'all have this historically great offense. And y'all have Lincoln Riley and y'all have 5-star Spencer Rattler, and like the defense is just like, oh, we just got to hold them to 35 today. Well, no, that's not the case anymore. Mm-hmm. Now you got to hold them to like 21 or something.
And one key aspect that the Oklahoma offense is missing is a running game. I mean, they're barely averaging 100 yards a game. They have T.J. Pledger and a freshman McGowan in the backfield, and they're not necessarily your typical power back. They're speed. You know, they want to hit the hole and they just want to go upfield really quick. Right now they have a running back, Ramondre Stevenson, who's out, who's like a Marshawn Lynch. He wants to get contact. He can get through the hole, and it's not an arm tackle to bring him down. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a huge player that you're missing because you don't have that physicality. You can't really, go between the tackles. And I think Oklahoma's offensive line is struggling right now because they're having to block a little differently for these smaller backs.
Man, I don't know I don't know how to feel about that because Oklahoma's O-line has always just been dominant no matter who was running behind them.
You really can't even say that now because even their pass game, the O-line can't give Spencer Rattler enough time.
Yeah, I don't think it's because of who's behind them. I just think they're probably a little young and a little inexperienced. Usually Oklahoma is running with three junior prospects that are ready to go to the league or senior prospects that are ready to go to the league. But right now they're pretty young up front. So
yeah, their most experienced is their center, Creed Humphrey, and he could have easily gone to the league last year.
Yeah. No, man. I think they O-line is all about chemistry, and they probably just lack that game experience chemistry right now.
Their offense definitely has potential. A lot of blame does go on them. Spencer Rattler throwing late INTs. I mean, they had an opportunity to go down and get a field goal, but obviously threw an interception down the middle against K-State. He threw up a late pass against Iowa State in the end zone to Marvin Mims. You could argue that Mims was held by the defender, but that's just
it's a bang-bang play.
Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma shouldn't have been in that situation in the first place against Iowa State. So, I mean, Oklahoma obviously has Texas coming up this weekend on Saturday at 11 a.m. What kind of position is Oklahoma in if they lose 3 straight?
They lose 3 straight in a 10-game season. I mean, they're already out of playoff contention with 2 losses in the Big 12. So, like, what else do they have to lose? At this point, for Oklahoma, the season is already busted. Now you're just trying to salvage the rest of it and go get some quality wins for your young quarterback and, like, for the team's morale. But, like, as far as that next level, like the playoffs, the NCAA playoffs is out of the picture for the Big 12 period probably now because of Oklahoma and Texas.
I wouldn't say – I mean, the season is a bust in terms of obviously their playoff hopes if you're taking into consideration how the committee has treated the Big 12. I mean, statistically, a two-loss
team is getting in the playoffs period. Like, not even an SEC 2-loss team is getting in the playoffs. So, like,
I think this year they have a better opportunity of getting a 2-loss team in. I mean, The SEC would have a better chance of getting a 2-loss team.
With how the SEC schedule is, like with everybody playing everybody this year, and like not only playing teams in your division, I feel like that could possibly happen because LSU it can be like, okay, Georgia beat Auburn, but Auburn beat LSU, and LSU beat Alabama, and Alabama beat Florida. So like if you have something like that happen, I can see like stuff. I can see a 2-loss team possibly getting in, but the 2-loss team would have to be like Alabama. Like a team that the committee loves no matter what, and like a team that the committee is always pushing for.
So, I mean, this is just like a what-if scenario. If Oklahoma were to win out, I mean, obviously their Big 12 hopes are still alive. They would be playing spoiler to everybody else. I mean, Oklahoma State's still alive for the playoffs. They're a really good team. I mean, they don't have their starting quarterback right now, but they look like the front runner.
If Oklahoma State loses they're not getting in the playoffs.
Yeah, this is
like
probably going to be the first year the Big 12 doesn't get in 3 years.
And that's what I'm saying though. Like with the playoffs, it's like they say it's a fair chance, but it's name based one, and it's record based two. So like if your record is good, but your name is not big enough for the playoffs, you will not get in.
So I think right now, Oklahoma is basically playing God with the college football playoff, because we have to talk about the chances of the Pac-12 and the Big Ten not being eligible for the playoffs.
Pac-12 isn't getting in
because they're
only playing 7 games.
Yeah, 7. That's 7 games with whoever is eligible for the championship game. They only have a 6 regular season game schedule. Yeah, so 7 for max if you go to the conference championship game.
Analysts have already said like there's no way a Pac-12 team gets in, even if they're undefeated.
I think the Big Ten's even in that situation. They're only playing 8 games. I mean, 9 games if you make the championship game. But I mean, that's still if Ohio State went undefeated.
If Ohio State went right, if Ohio State went 9-0, they're only 1 game away from the SEC record, which is 10-0. Like that would be an undefeated season. So Ohio State would get in, just off the fact that like they won 9 games and they're Ohio State. But in the Pac-12, they're already frowned upon for competition, right? You have the same struggles the Big 12 and the Big 10 have. Like people don't value a lot of the schools, a lot of the programs in the conference. So like a lot of the wins are what, how do you say it? Depreciated. A lot of the wins are just looked over and like they hold no value. So like you have to have for you to be compared to the SEC schools, you have to have a close record to them. So like 9-0 compared to 10-0 is way closer than 7-0 compared to 10-0. Like I said, analysts were saying like a 9-1 SEC team could beat out a 7-0 Oregon. So like I think that's how the committee is looking at it.
So I mean, I'm gonna extend on why Oklahoma is basically playing God with the playoffs. If they win out, I mean, you have a 2-loss Big 12 champion that they're virtually out because the committee would probably never consider a 2-loss Big 12 champion. You'd obviously have the ACC champ, which is going to be Clemson more than likely. You have the SEC
we'll see
champ.
Saturday. That's going to be a good game Saturday, Miami and Clemson.
Yeah, and then the Pac-12, they're only playing 6 games, 7 if you win the championship. That's if someone wins out. Big 10, I mean, still in consideration. You potentially have 3 or 4 out of the 5 Power 5 conferences being able to get into the postseason playoffs. That leaves room for a non-Power 5 team like BYU, SMU, and Cincinnati to make that like, 4th spot.
Yeah, I can see BYU is a top 10 team right now, ranked, right?
They're ranked high, yeah. SMU is even up there. I mean, Cincinnati is actually the front runner to be a non-Power 5 team to get the 4th spot.
I don't see, like, I watch SMU football, and I just don't see that. They, like, you know how you can watch UCF and you can see them, like, I can see them making plays against SEC teams. If you watched it, you've seen it actually happen. I don't see SMU doing that for some reason, but that's just me.
I think they have the offense. I mean, they have Shane Buechele, a quarterback transfer from Texas. He can throw the ball. Defensively, I don't know how they necessarily stack up against a team like Clemson.
But
or Alabama.
Why I say that though, because like, all right, you got a quarterback that can throw it, but can all your receivers beat these guys? Might play man to man the whole game. That has these four star, 5-star corners, all of them running 4-4, 4-5. Like, can your receivers consistently beat them enough for you to throw and win this game or compete in this game? Like, I think that's what it comes down to. Like when you how UCF recruits, they're in a hotbed of football. Like you're getting all the 3 stars and 2 stars from Florida, but these dudes can go to other states and be 4 stars and no, I ain't gonna say 5 stars, but be 4 stars in other states. So like they getting it on Rivals and 247. It says UCF is recruiting 3 stars, but they're getting quality recruits and guys that can burn people. And running backs that don't look that fast, they don't look that big. I mean, but they're running 4.3. So like that's what I think. I think that's the edge that UCF has on schools in their conference when it comes to playing out of conference games.
Absolutely. I would not advocate for obviously a Clemson versus SMU. That'd probably be a bye week, especially how Trevor Lawrence is playing right now. Yeah. He would obliterate any defense right now that's out of a non-Power 5. But, I mean, Oklahoma holds all that power in their hands. I mean, if they win out, they obviously eliminate the Big 12. They eliminate the Pac-12. You have that one more spot. I am never an advocate for having 2 teams in the same conference go in.
I could see. I'm going to tell you why I don't agree with that. Because you say it should be conference champions, right? But, like, what if Oklahoma wins the Big 12? Which they might. They more than likely, they still are. Oklahoma wins the Big 12. You feel like Oklahoma better than Florida, Georgia, Alabama?
This season? Or if the playoffs were just strictly based off of
like right now, do you feel like those teams are better do you feel like Oklahoma are better than any 3 of those teams right now?
No, absolutely not.
Exactly. So, like, what would be the problem with those 3 teams and Clemson getting in? Because Oklahoma lost 2 games to Kansas State and Iowa State.
I would see it as with this particular situation, OU, even if they are the Big 12 champion, they should be skipped over, but it should be next conference up, not next same conference. So it shouldn't be SEC champion and then SEC runner up.
I'm saying is the ultimate goal of a playoff is to get the best teams in. Like in any sport, on any level, the goal of the playoffs is to get the best teams in. So like if the best teams are runner ups or is the 3rd best team in the conference, but they're literally the 4th best team in the country, why shouldn't they be jumped over this conference champion or this conference runner up who is not?
So this is how I see it. Alabama and Georgia have played each other, obviously, in championship weekend in December. Let's use a hypothetical. Alabama was number 1. Georgia was number 4 going into conference play. Alabama beats Georgia. Georgia is obviously a good team since they're sitting at that 4th spot. They lose in a close game. Committee's like, all right, let's go ahead and give Georgia the nod, keep them at that 4th spot, and we'll keep Oklahoma back at 5. How is that fair for Alabama having to beat the same team twice when they already beat them?
But if they would have lost to them, they would have got in. And then how is that fair for Georgia to beat Alabama again because they got bumped to number 4 after they beat them in a close game?
But obviously they're better. They're the better team than the SEC. So obviously Georgia should be backed off, and the next conference should go up. But listen to what I'm saying. Like you said, how is it fair to Alabama to have to beat them twice, right? If they already beat them. Okay, like you said, they play. Alabama loses in a close game, and they only drop from 1 to 4. How is it fair for Georgia to have to possibly play them twice when they already beat them? It wouldn't be if Alabama were to lose at that one spot. You
want the best teams.
You leave the top 4.
But that's what I'm saying. You want the best teams in, right? Like ultimately, your fairness is like it's like almost like a participation prize type of fairness. Like
I view fair as in the college football playoff was intended to have invitees from multiple conferences. and it doesn't seem like all of them are getting the same treatment. We have yet to see a non-Power 5 team make it to the playoffs because they say that their resume is not good enough, or
Which is true.
their physicality isn't the same as Georgia or Alabama. UCF should have been in the playoffs when they went undefeated.
No, they shouldn't.
Because
I'm gonna tell you, they shouldn't have.
They beat Auburn convincingly.
They beat Auburn in the bowl game. They didn't beat them. They didn't have that on their resume when they were being considered for the playoffs.
But it just goes to show that their level of measurement is off.
All right, do you understand? But do you understand bowl games though? So you get a lot of bowl games where teams don't want to play, and their coach, but the coaches want them to play. So they go out lackadaisical, and I'm not saying that's the case with UCF. But if you watch that game, you knew UCF was way more motivated for that game than Auburn. But that's how bowl games go. And I'm not saying that's why they won, but I'm saying that's why they jumped out. And then when Auburn tried to start playing UCF, like UCF already had momentum rolling, they caught a pick six and ended the game. So like what I'm saying is, if UCF was to have a Power 5 school, a good opponent in their regular season schedule, and they would have had that on their resume, I don't see why you couldn't let them in. Mm-hmm. But by them not having it on their resume before that bowl game, I understood why they didn't get in. It goes back to saying like why a 9-1 SEC team would get in over a 7-0 Oregon team, because you know the quality of opponents that this team has faced. And you know the quality of opponents that UCF faced. Like, before Auburn, they hadn't played anybody that was worth saying they beat this team, they need to be in.
And that's what killed Boise State during the BCS era. I mean, they would always be ranked in the BCS high at either 2 or 3, but once they lost one game, I mean, they fell out of the top 5, top 10.
As it should be, though, because the game they would lose would be a conference game, a game that they should handle. Like, that's why UCF won't get in this year. If there was a year for UCF to get in, it was this year. But they didn't handle Tulsa. They took a game off in conference play that they couldn't afford.
And this is why I don't like the playoff setup now, because TCU, do you remember this year when TCU was undefeated? They were at that 4th spot and they got jumped by a one-loss Ohio State team. They went on to win the national championship. So obviously they got some things right, but
TCU lost, didn't it? That was the year Trayvon Boykin was playing quarterback, right? If I'm not mistaken.
This was the year that they outright won the Big 12. Big 12 didn't have a championship game yet, so they didn't have that last week to make a case to the committee, and Ohio State did, and they went on. And
who's Ohio State's one loss to?
I believe that was the year they lost to Virginia Tech.
TCU lost to Baylor that year. And they lost to Baylor in a 61-58 shootout.
That was in 2014?
Yeah. So that's why they didn't get in. But I do remember that season.
That's right.
They were playing pretty well.
They were saying that a one-loss Ohio State team was better than the one-loss Big 12 team without the conference championship. But you can make the case that TCU had one of the best offenses. But, I mean, I see that as that last week of the season, I mean, they booted the Big 12 out because of a narrative that they're not better than them on defense.
But ultimately, like, Ohio State had one more win than TCU because they had a conference championship. So, like, ultimately, Ohio State had to be in because they had more wins. Mm-hmm.
And that's what plays into this year. So do you take a 2-loss Oklahoma over a 1-loss Big Ten team?
A 1-loss, that's tough. I mean, it depends on who the loss is to, because y'all lost to Kansas State and Iowa State. Like that,
it's tough. It's tough losses.
That's what. But this is my thing, right? When people go back to look at it, if the committee, if it comes to it, the committee's gonna look back at it and be like, okay, their first loss came to Kansas State. Who did Kansas State lose to this year? First loss is Kansas State season. Arkansas State. That's a big red flag. Like, then you lose to Iowa State. Like, if Iowa State doesn't have a good season, that's going to look real bad. Mm-hmm. So, like, ultimately, it's a lot of stuff that plays into it. But, like, if Ohio State's one loss is to, like, Penn State, or Michigan, like or Wisconsin. Like those are losses that can keep them in the hunt. But if their one losses to like Maryland or let me see who else. Nebraska. Like those are losses that will kick them out.
Well, yeah, I mean, Ohio State opens up the season against Nebraska. So, I mean, if they were to open up the season and, lay an egg on that, then I could see the Big 12 potentially getting in with a 1 or 2 loss team. A lot would have to play out in the ACC and the SEC as well. Mm-hmm. Clemson would at least have to drop 1. Alabama would have to drop 1.
Hey.
And expecting that Georgia and Florida, take a step back as well. And with it being a shortened season, you don't have a lot of time. I mean, Oklahoma has absolutely no room for error. So let's kind of transition back. In order for Oklahoma to do any of this or to make this possible, they have to fix things on defense. And right now, their defensive backs are not getting the job done. You can even say their physicality.
Okay, how many sacks do y'all have? Let's like we talk about y'all DBs a lot, but let's look into like the deeper the depths of why defenses don't perform well. How many sacks does Oklahoma have on the season?
Okay, so I'm let me before I get into that, let me say something really quick. Oklahoma historically has an awful defense. We've noted on that before. If you watch their first 3 games, that defensive line cannot get pressure onto the quarterback. So
but you hear what you say, right? Defensive line cannot get pressure.
Absolutely. And you're leaving the DBs on an island.
Exactly.
So they can't cover that.
That's like 40% of the problem with your DBs right there. They're having to cover for too long, right? Boom. That's almost half of the problem.
And I want to bring this up. Against K-State, K-State ran a few quarterback sneaks. What is the one thing you do during a quarterback sneak on the defensive line lineup?
You pinch, attack the A gaps.
You put somebody over the center because that's more than likely where the quarterback is going to lean if it's inches.
Kinda. I mean, you want to have 2 guys in your A gaps, yeah.
So obviously K-State was down near the red zone. Thompson had inches to go. They had nobody lined up right over the center. Huge gap. Nobody lined up. So is it the players or is it the defensive scheme? Is it Alex Grinch's fault for missing that multiple times?
But that's a player's. That's like knowing football though. Like if you know a quarterback sneak is about to come, that's on the coaches. Yeah, but like coaches can't scream. Coaches can't run on the field and line you up. Like you got to have football situations in your head.
So if a coach calls, I mean, you're a football player, and I know you're on the offense, but if a coach calls a play and let's say you're on defense and you obviously someone's not having gap integrity, are you going to go and line that up and go against them?
If you're a linebacker,
that kind of play out?
I mean, on 4th down, if it's 4th and inches, like you said, and you have any kind of sense, you either calling a timeout. And if you're on the field, you're either calling a timeout or you're going to self-correct and you'll explain it in film if it don't work.
And that's the thing. There's absolutely no self-awareness. I mean, I'm watching it on TV, and pre-snap, I knew it was going to be a quarterback sneak right off to the center's right side. Mm-hmm. I mean, the gap could have freaking fit 2 running backs through it. You have to have awareness if you're going to win games. And obviously, that defensive line.
And not only the D line, but like if the D line wasn't lined up there, why wasn't a linebacker walked up knowing the situation? Like, because ultimately it had to be, it was somebody's gap responsibility to be right there. So even if the D line, even if the defensive lineman wasn't lined up in that spot, there should have been a defensive player responsible for that gap, regardless.
And it's not like this is a new problem for Oklahoma. I mean, gap integrity on defense was a huge reason why they lost against Georgia in the Rose Bowl. Georgia took advantage of Oklahoma's defense, and they ran it down their throat in the second half. And you watched multiple times where their linebackers were overshooting their gaps, and the running back would shoot through it. I mean, this is nothing new. The defensive back issue is nothing new. Obviously, they're averaging like 5'9", and I mean, last week Iowa State's wide receivers were like averaging a height of 6'4". So, I mean, statistically, you're not going to be able to break that up consistently. But, I mean, something has to change.
OU got. They living off that OU tradition right now. They gonna have to start changing the way they recruit, or it's gonna keep getting worse. And
I wouldn't even say it's not a tradition for OU to have bad defense. You could make the argument that Oklahoma hasn't had a defense since their national championship run with Sam Bradford in 2008, where they faced Tim Tebow. Mm-hmm. I mean, in previous years before that, they had a defense. Oklahoma competed with some of the best teams in the country. Somewhere along the line, they started relying on the offense too much, or maybe just defensive recruits. The defensive recruits couldn't keep up. They couldn't get
the offense got better and the defense didn't. That was all that happened. Like when y'all went through that little, not a drought, y'all were obviously good, but like that mediocre thing, like when Blake Bell was the quarterback. Like when y'all went through that stage, your offense, like, obviously has gotten better since then, but your defense has not.
They've had moments where they showed so much maturity. And, I mean, even in the K-State game, that defense was stout. I mean, they held K-State to almost, like, under 100 yards for the half. And then coming out of the second half, you allow them to get 300 plus. That's just unacceptable. I don't know what kind of, talk was given in the locker room, but obviously things need to change recruitment-wise. I know fans are advocating to recruit taller defensive backs. Mike Stoops, obviously, he was fired a couple years ago, and Alex Grinch was brought in to kind of change the tradition on the defensive side of the ball. He's in his second year, so, I mean, there's still room for improvements. He still has yet to, weed out kind of the bad defensive players that were recruited, by Mike Stoops. And one that I would like to note is, I mean, Radley Hiles, 4-star defensive back that's listed at 5'9". I was excited when he came on to Oklahoma. I'm like, this is, this is rare, 4-star defensive back.
I'm going to tell you what's crazy, right? He decided to decommit from Florida State because he knew it would be easier for him to play at Oklahoma.
Absolutely.
And not like Florida State is being so hot right now, but obviously the defensive backs there are better than he is. I'm not going to lie to you. I've watched both. And I can see why he chose
Nebraska. I mean, Nebraska was a runner-up for his commits.
Like, obviously,
according to ESPN, they were. But, I mean, Oklahoma should have, in hindsight, Oklahoma should have let him commit somewhere. I don't know.
He was one of the best DBs in the nation coming out.
I guess the narrative was still, we don't need, the best defensive backs. Our offense is,
he was a 4-star, though.
He got 4-star at 5'9". That's
Florida State.
That's rough.
Florida State has a 4-star corner a corner that was a 4-star at 5'9", and this dude is probably a top 5 corner going into the draft next year. He's played 138 coverage snaps and haven't gave up 1 TD this year with 3 picks.
So Oklahoma has, they've had good defensive backs. I mean, Aaron Colvin still in the NFL. Zach Sanchez is in the NFL right now. Parnell Motley is in the NFL. So, I mean, you can go on with the list. That's just in recent years they've had great defensive backs, but it's just like there's no sense of urgency on the defense, or there's no concern about somebody losing their starting position.
Yeah.
There's so many players that are on the bench that you could filter out, especially right now. If nobody's producing, what is stopping the coaches from filtering more defensive players in and out of the lineup? I mean, what's your take on that? Because is it reps wise, or are they just trying to get guys that are in there that have experience? I mean, I personally don't understand that. If you're consistently getting beat downfield, you're talking trash, and then the next play you miss an assignment, you should get pulled from the field and put one of those young guys in.
Yeah, no, man. I don't know, bro. Oklahoma, I don't know how to answer problems like this. It's like Florida State. Like, it's just raining on them right now. So, like, dudes need to tighten up. Internally, I think it's gonna have to be a class of culture changers. Gonna need to come in and change both of those programs. But man, like I said, hopefully they turn it around this week against Texas and they can put on a better performance and not have fans so mad. But Texas is looking to bounce back from their first loss last week too, so it's gonna be a good game Saturday.
Yeah, their defensive struggles are catching up with them. Which team needs this more? Is it Texas or Oklahoma?
Texas, because they're trying to fight to get in the playoffs still.
I mean, I would say right now Oklahoma probably needs this. A 3-game losing streak is obviously on the line, potentially.
That's on the line, but like y'all not getting in the playoffs. Texas got a chance to.
But Oklahoma still has, they've won 5 straight Big 12 championships, so obviously that's still something that they want to, uphold. They
but we talking about
6.
But in terms of needing it more, like the bigger the prize, the more you need it, and that's why I say Texas. Like I understand Oklahoma don't want to have 3 loss. They haven't had a 3-loss season in what 3 years,
since
4 years.
2014 was probably the first
3 or
time
4
that somebody
years.
was actually expecting a 3-loss, 4-loss Oklahoma team.
Yeah, so like it's been a while. So obviously you don't want to do that 5 straight Big 12 championships. You want to get it back. But as far as needing it more, Texas needs a Big 12 championship bad. They haven't had one in a while. Texas needs to get in the playoffs. They haven't had this type of relevancy in a while, like since 2006 type deal. So like I think Texas needs it a little bit more than Oklahoma. But we'll see Saturday who wants it more. That's what it's about ultimately.
Absolutely. And I'm not too convinced that Texas is going to compete at a high level on Saturday. I mean, they were probably one of the most undisciplined teams last week against TCU, having over 200 yards and penalties. They beat themselves in that game, so I think it's still going to be a good game in terms of, it being a rivalry. I mean, Oklahoma and Texas always give each other their best. I think Oklahoma is going to come out on the defensive side of the ball and kind of try and prove themselves. I expect them to put more pressure on Sam Ehlinger. What is your score prediction? I think I probably have a similar score to a couple years ago when Kyler Murray was there in 2018, probably like a 48-41 shootout.
I was thinking like 45-38, Texas wins.
Ooh, Texas wins. That would be rough. And let's kind of go off that. If Oklahoma loses 3 straight, if you look ahead at their schedule, I mean, they have TCU coming up. If you just look at it, I mean, their only other wins could probably come at KU and Baylor on the season.
Yeah, no, it'll be tough. It's gonna be tough for sure. You better tighten up. They better get right. But
so you potentially put, Oklahoma at, 3-7 maybe on the season.
If they lose tomorrow, I wouldn't be surprised by it.
It's not an unrealistic thing to expect. I mean, because right now TCU's playing good defense.
Where I'm at with it, I don't think TCU is truly better than Texas. I don't think that win last week was like showing that TCU was better than Texas. So I'm not gonna say that Oklahoma won't beat TCU. I'm not gonna say that like Baylor won't beat Oklahoma. I don't know how the rest of the season gonna turn out. The Big 12 is up for grabs right now.
Absolutely.
But I know if Texas grabs that win Saturday, they won't lose another game this season. Just off momentum.
I wouldn't say that necessarily. Obviously, I mean, it is a possibility. Oklahoma State is still one of the better offenses that
they won't beat
Texas will face for the rest of the season.
They won't beat them.
But absolutely, there's a lot of games to play. If Oklahoma wins, then I could see them potentially building momentum and winning out the rest of the season. Do you have anything to add for this?
Nah, man. Thanks for having me on today.
All right, no problem.
See y'all.
All right, that is going to do it for us today. I'm Christian Phillips, alongside me, Amari and Graham Bolden. See you next week.